Hi, and welcome to Coaching 101, where we look at the science behind classic coaching techniques and tools and share how we use them in our own coaching practices. And today's topic is really one of the fundamentals of coaching, which is holding people, seeing people as naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. So, hi, Ursula, welcome.
Hi, and great to be here again to unpack yet another super important coaching tool and technique. And I think holding others naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, and we call it NCRW for short because it's a bit of a mouthful.
It is a bit of a mouthful, yeah.
Is the way I see it really the fundamental mindset of coaching.
Yeah. So say more about this fundamental mindset.
As a coach, I have to look at my clients from this perspective. I have to have the mindset of basically what this translated is, they are having their own answers, they have their own wisdom, they have their own inner resources, and they have their own creativity. And I need to see them as such, knowing that they will find it.
That's absolutely. And it's one of those things that if you're not fundamentally seeing people this way, holding them this way, you're not coaching. And there are other things that we do where it's fine not to, I like this as a way of being in the world, and we'll talk more about that later, but I sort of like to see all people this way. But particularly, I was going to say, one of the things when I used to work in basic coach training for the Coaches Training Institute, and people would fail their final exam, their oral exam, not always, but a large percentage of the time, this was the piece they failed on. It's like their tools were fine, their techniques were maybe okay, but there was something missing in that they felt either that they had better ideas or that somehow this person needed fixing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that my supervisor, one of his wise advice to me as a student was, as long as you hold them naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, you will be fine. Just do that.
I love that. Probably a lot of people have heard that, because it's one of those things and we're going to talk more about how to do this. First, we'll talk a little bit about the brain science behind why it's important, and then we'll look a little more at what does it actually mean to do that? But I think it is, a lot of us got that advice in coaching, maybe most of us, because it's not sort of the way the world operates. If you come to the average friend, person, parent, whoever, spouse, and you say, I've got this challenge and here's how I'm feeling, what's the first thing they often do?
Let me tell you.
Oh, you should do this. Did you try that? Even to the point where I know people that are struggling with health issues, this can really come up a lot, where they're like, don't give me any more, tell me what supplements to take. Don't, you have to put these boundaries up, because everybody's got an opinion and everybody's got an idea of what you should do. And very few people say, what are you thinking?
What have you tried? And it's funny, as you were saying, what do people do? Well, they don't even ask you what kind of advice you want. They just, I find parenting is another one of those hot topics. I mean, everybody thinks they know how you should raise your child.
Right.
And so and I really love what you were saying early on. You just love to take NCRW and see the world, your relationship, and people as a whole like that. And so I really want to, sort of go through the history of that, what it does in the brain, and then also the gift of what that actually can be, not only in coaching.
Yeah, so let's go there, because there's a lot to say about this topic. One of the things that seems to be pretty well validated at this point is coaching didn't make this up. Coaching is an evolution of a lot of things in human development, psychology, even improv theater. There's a lot of things that came together. People have done research projects on this. No one person created coaching. But one of the big influencers in this area was a psychologist named Carl Rogers, who was even looking at this kind of way of looking at people in the 40s and 50s. And one of the things that we found as we were looking into Carl Rogers is that he was one of the first people that said, hey, this isn't a patient. He was a therapist, not a coach, but this isn't my patient, this is my client. And you can feel just holding them that way is a different leveling of the playing field than the hierarchical sort of, I'm the expert, you're the patient, you're one down from me.
You know, that's really interesting. When I'm asked by potential clients or students, you know, what's the difference between coaching and therapy? You know, one of the big differences is, and it is really grounded in NCRW, is that we don't think that there's anything innately wrong with anybody. There, you know, we all come with our, you know, challenges and, you know, quirks and, you know, whatever limits or belief limits. But really, and this is where the client versus patient difference comes in. You know, our clients are not ill. They are whole. They just need some expansion or learning or growth or change, whatever they're seeking.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the like fine tuning around NCRW, but if we look at it in general and with a general coaching population, so we always tend to talk about what we would hold as very neurotypical people who are available for coaching, are able to be coached. What do we think that the impact of this way of seeing them would be? It might be different in somebody who had active brain damage, for example, but we'll talk a little more about that later. There's a couple of things that I think are pretty interesting in terms of the brain. One is that when we see people as able, capable, as somehow having their own answers about themselves, not their own answers about electrical engineering, if they've never done it, right? I've got my own answers about electrical engineering. They would probably get me electrocuted. So
I just wanted to say that's probably going to get you killed.
Exactly, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about my answers about me and what I want and who I am and what's important to me and what I want to do with my life and what kind of relationships I want to have. That's what we mean by the answers within. But when we hold people that way, there seems to be pretty good scientific evidence that says the brain goes into a state where learning and change and openness is more likely. And so in neuroscience, they would call this a toward state in the brain. And when you deal with people, the researchers that did one really good study, and this was Richard Biotsis at Case Western Reserve, looking at what they called compassionate coaching, which is basically holding people NCRW and doing some good techniques with that. But basically saying to people, what do you want? Where do you see yourself? Versus saying, hey, here's your test results and you should probably look at being an accountant. That what they found was a real difference in brain activity. And in the one case where they were more just told what to do, you get a brain that's frankly less creative, less active, and you may even activate a little defensiveness. Whereas if I say, Ursula, you know, I've got all your test results, but what I'm really curious about is, where do you want to be in 5 years?
I do not want to be an accountant.
I don't want to be an accountant, right? And you can even feel that that one makes you want to kind of lean back.
Yeah.
And one makes you kind of want to lean in.
Yes.
And when I've got a client that's leaning in, they are more available to the process.
And what I seem to remember also, maybe not about this study, but something similar, is also that the trust level between the two people is more sustainable. I seem to remember that even if you then give advice or have some advice or information to share, the possibility of the person taking that in, that likelihood is far greater.
I think that was part of this study, that there were carryover results that
Yes.
how they tended to hold that person who more asked them versus telling them had a carryover down there like 2 weeks later. You know, they still tended to be in this more towards state, more open.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing too from the brain is that when we try to activate people's own answers, we just get them thinking. And so, Ursula's drinking. I'm going to ask you, so why is it important to get them thinking?
Well, this for me is about neuroplasticity, because every time we have to think, and especially have to think hard, we create neural connections. And that is really what we want in the brain of the other person. We want new connections to be made that then, you know, we can build on. And so, you know, that for me that's the most important thing. Is you would say you want the light bulb go on in the other person's head, not in my own head. So,
well, and I think that's part of the problem, and not to get too far down a rabbit trail, but you know, why we want to fix or give advice. Often, if we're the one listening to somebody's advice, we're not stressed by it. We're not distressed by it. We're kind of like, oh, okay, interesting. And so we're running through our own brain and coming up with solutions, but they may not stick because they haven't been generated in the other brain, so they don't have the same level of personal relevance.
yes.
And personal relevance is critical for neuroplasticity. If I don't want to learn it or take it in, I will not focus my attention there and allow those neural patterns to develop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what's interesting about this whole part of advice giving, as we know, because we've been teaching some of this stuff, is that even if the advice is good advice, I won't even hear it, because I'm so anti-advice trained by now, having been a coach for 20 years, that even if the advice is good, I probably won't hear it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. But yet, you know, I like to say, if it's relevant to you, you'll read the vacuum cleaner instructions, right? If it's relevant. You know, I literally had to take my flippin' vacuum cleaner apart the other day, and I was looking for those instructions, and I hate reading instructions. So if we create this relevancy for the client by asking them, what do you care about? This is one of the reasons we did a series already on values, but it's one of the reasons you want to have a client in touch with their values, because it generates this, wow, I care about that, makes it relevant so that they're more likely to go do it. And coaching is about helping people make positive changes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
no, totally. It really, that whole personal relevance. I know this is a rabbit hole, but anyway, you know, here's my husband who yesterday said to me, you know, let me show you how this works. And I just looked at him and I went,
nope.
I don't really want to know, because I didn't care about that. And I can't even remember now what
it was, right?
Because it wasn't relevant. It was like, no, I have you for that. So you read the instructions. I'm sorry. I just don't care about it.
Well,
oh God,
you know, it makes me think of when Noah, who's now 23, was going off to college, and he was my IT guy, you know, because he's a millennial and he knows how to do that stuff. So, you know, he would be setting up my new phone or whatever, and he was like, Mom, what are you going to do when I go to college? I'm like, I'll figure it out then, because then it will be relevant. I'll learn it. So I think there is this, when we have the solutions and the answers, they may be very relevant to us, but not necessarily to the client. And so this holding back, guys, settle down over there. This, you know, helping them find what's important to them, really critical.
Yeah,
We have absolutely. A little cat fight going on. Apparently, what's important to them is who gets to sit on the good chair. We have one good chair, and everybody wants it.
According to them, it's one good chair. I know your house. All the chairs are good as far as I'm concerned.
I don't know why. This is the good chair. So we have fights over this. So I think one of the things that Ursula and I both struggled with, and you know, we both coach a lot of coaches and teach coaching, and you know, it's when I think about naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, it's a really big deal. But when I went to coaching school, I think we just sort of talked about it. You know, what do you think it is? I mean, not that that's bad, but it was sort of an evolution of me kind of figuring out what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the ways that we have over the years kind of realized that can be helpful for people to more get into it rather than just sort of discussing it theoretically is to experience it.
Yes. And so we have developed a couple of questions that get to the heart of the matter, potentially.
So we love to ask this, and we want everybody to do a thought experiment with us. We're going to ask a couple of questions here. So do this on your own. Think of a time when someone did not see you, in whatever your definition is, they did not see you as naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. They saw you as somehow less than what you were maybe capable of or who you were. So think of that. And Ursula, can you think of a time that happened to you?
Well, I actually just wanted to ask you that.
And ask me the same thing.
Yeah.
I think, and that'll give you a chance to give your brain a chance to catch up. I was going to do the same thing. Classic co-leader move. Well, you know, I think there was some stuff early in my career where I really wanted to be, I wanted to be a trainer. Interesting, that's where I've ended up. And I would, you know, sort of say little things I was working for a large nonprofit at the time, and I'd sort of say, you know, this like, that would be really fun to try that. And I would just sort of be like, that's not your role. You know, that's not your role. And I would just think, okay, never mind. But I had this feeling like maybe I could do it even though I hadn't, like I wanted to learn that. I wanted to explore that part of me. But I didn't get any like uptake or support.
Encouragement or people saying, yes, go try it or whatever.
Take this class or anything. It was just sort of like, that's not, I think the feeling was that's not what we need you for.
Whether you could do it or not was irrelevant.
Yeah.
You know, as you were talking, I was sort of thinking about my mom, God rest her soul. She had a perspective about me that came from her belief that I should stay safe in the safe swimming lanes.
Yeah.
So every time I remember, do you remember the first time you mentioned to me that we potentially should go to Nepal?
Yes.
And I shared this excitement about going to Nepal and, you know, working with this women's cooperative in the mountains with Mom. And she said, well, is that really necessary? And, you know, isn't that extreme? And, you know, and I mean, I know now that this came from her own fear and had basically nothing to do with me. However, the way that landed was, you know, this is too much for you. You know, this is, you know, you don't take that risk. That is not something that you should try.
That you could be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And she had a little bit, her world belief was a little bit skewed to that direction. Do something that's safe.
That's so interesting. And so you're talking about the impact of deflation.
Yes.
For me, it was sort of doubting myself. You know, they don't see this in me, so maybe that's not really what I'm capable of. I should just stay in my lane, kind of thing. And one of the things that's really interesting, speaking of Nepal, is that Ursula and I have asked this question all over the world, including Nepal when we went there.
Yes, we did.
Rural Women's Cooperative. We have asked this question at an artist cooperative in Costa Rica, also very rural. We've asked it in businesses. We've asked it to teenagers in high schools all over the world, different you know, roles and ages. Consistently, what people say is they didn't like it.
Yeah.
It disempowered them. It made them doubt themselves. Sometimes it made them angry enough to prove it to the other person, but that's like 10% of the time. Sometimes they're like, I'll show you, right? But mostly people gave up or just felt like shit.
Yeah. Well, and I think the seed of doubt is a very interesting, it's a really interesting seed that gets planted, it could potentially get planted in your own brain. Talk about neuroplasticity. And if you listen to those seeds of doubts and you reaffirm them, then your brain becomes doubtful. And
Yeah.
it's a very tricky, yeah, it's a very tricky thing for the brain.
So
So,
now think about, oh, sorry, what were you going to
yeah,
say?
no, that I was going
Okay,
to the next,
I'm going to the flip side. So think about a time, and everybody do this with us. Think about a time when somebody really did see you that way, maybe more than you saw yourself. Maybe they saw more in you than you really even saw, and they really did hold you this, like, you can do this. And what was the impact of that?
So I had a boss when I was running a front desk operation in a very large downtown London, UK hotel. And I sort of oversaw the smaller area of that reception front desk area. And she did the whole reservation, the whole big thing. And I will never forget this. We had lunch together where she proposed that I would follow in her footsteps because she was being asked the next level up. And I remember this. I almost choked on my soup because it was almost like I was going like, who are you talking to? And she said, I want you to take over for me because you are ready. I believe you can do it. And I mean, I was literally shocked. I didn't know what to say.
And what was the ultimate impact on you of being seen that
Well,
way?
the first impact was I was scared to death.
I think that's very typical. Yeah.
I mean, it was like literally, it's like, well, who are you talking to? And then I felt so honored, so seen, so appreciated, that somebody would have such belief in me. It was incredibly empowering.
And I think there's some good research around this in schools and in organizations. I think there's an HBR article from a long time ago called the Pygmalion effect. And it really just points to that people will largely fulfill the expectations that you set for them, that
Yes.
if you see them this way as very capable, that a large percentage of people will become that because that's what you believe. And there's a classic study where they told teachers that they had a class of gifted kids who did not actually test at gifted, but at the end of the year they did because they'd been seen that way.
Yeah,
So
the
there's
teachers believed that this is what they had in front of them. And so they just gave them those gifted assignments and people the students just rose to that occasion.
Totally held of NCRW. I think, for me, one of the times that really comes to mind is my dear friend, Amy Logan, who was working for the Coaches Training Institute many years ago. And I was just starting to explore neuroscience, and she got a hold of me and we became, friends. And I was at the point where I wasn't convinced that I was smart enough, understood enough, or really had anything to offer. And man, she stood in that space of the coaching world needs to hear about this. This is new. What you're talking about is new. It's important. I want you to write a white paper. And I did the same thing. I'm like, who are you talking to? Holy little old me. And then there's also, what if I fail?
Yeah.
Right? What if I'm not who you see I am? But there was also like, okay, you're a smart woman. You've seen a lot of the world. You see this in me. I'm going to do my best to fulfill it. And what I will say is that conversation with Amy Logan, everything that we've done, has some of its seeds in that. And I'm eternally grateful that she saw me as bigger than I saw myself. And she's not surprising. She's a coach.
Yeah.
So
that's the impact when we hold other people naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. The impact is of empowerment, inspiration, and for them to accomplish things that they might not believe themselves that they can.
And you might scare them a little bit in the process. And so I think a lot of coaches can relate to this if you see this in your clients or you have seen it in yourself. And, so that to me is one of the ways that has helped me get it in my bones this looking at what does it feel like when somebody doesn't do that? And what does it feel like when they do? And this, place of feeling sort of held and buoyed up and believed in, man, I like that a lot better than this place of feeling like maybe I can't really do anything and maybe I'm just a,
Yeah.
useless waste of space. I don't like that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and in the emotion of what it on the impact of that, in that lies the proof that it is the way to look at people that way. The
Yeah.
other thing that I find with holding people this way, beyond my clients, so I'm looking sort of now towards my kids, is it has given me an enormous amount of freedom.
Yeah.
The freedom to not have to come to a rescue, to feel that whatever challenges they have, I have to fix it. I can totally trust that with the support that they need, whatever it might be, they are totally capable of running their own lives. And now that they are 33 and 38, they run their own lives.
Yeah. And they
They
were
don't
raised
need me.
that way.
They really don't. And it's kind of like astonishing.
You make me remember something that when I was doing a lot of coaching of managers years ago, I would teach them this idea as a work-life balance tool.
Yes.
Because it was like, what if you held your staff naturally creative, resourceful, and whole? You might actually be able to go home at night. And for them, that was often a real aha. Where am I not holding my staff big enough? Where am I taking on, because I'm the manager and I think I need to be responsible for everything? Where can I let go a bit if I had this mindset? And I love what you're saying as a parent, because certainly also as a leader, it doesn't mean everybody knows everything. And I think about, as a manager, as a parent, as a teacher, you can hold people NCRW, naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. You are one of their resources.
Yes.
And I always want my kid to know I am one of his resources, but I also trust he'll figure it out.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say about that, and I think this is true for any kind of system that you're in, whether it's a manager or whether it's a parent, whatever, I also hold that I am not responsible for his failures, and I don't get credit for his successes. His successes are his own and his failures are his own. And I'm just cheering him on as best I can.
And this is such an important thing, whether you're a manager or a parent or, in any relationship, this whole concept that we are not responsible for their mistakes.
Yeah.
I think the important part about that is we actually, in order to do this, we have to hold ourselves naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. We have to trust that we've done our best as a leader, as a manager, as a parent. We've done the best we can. And now, whatever their failings or mistakes and failures are the ones that, they will have to learn from. And it is a learning experience, but it takes a huge amount of trust.
Yeah, it does. And I also think self-compassion, because sometimes maybe you didn't give them all the information and they maybe made a bad mistake because there's something you didn't provide. So this is a very, we're talking about just a way of holding people. And, I think it has a lot of fine tuning to it and some buts, but fundamentally, I will tell you that it just is a recipe for making life easier on every level and having people feel like you are the person they want to talk to, whether
Yes.
you're a coach or a parent or a friend. So before we finish, Ursula, what are just a couple of tips for how do you do this better? As a coach, what are some of the things that you do that really demonstrate that you're holding people this way?
Well, I think that just even looking and playing with the questions that we have asked on this video is what does this actually mean to you personally? What was the experience that you had when you were held or not held as naturally creative, resourceful, and whole? Gives you an inkling about the emotion. And that is then something that you want to create in the other person. And I think the other one is that we really regularly do in coaching, we really give assignments and make requests that are, I think, a true sign of holding the other person naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And
Like pushing them a little
yeah,
further, like you can, yeah.
you can do that, cheering them on. And I even think that that even when they're in the midst of a challenge, the ability for us to put the phone down when time's up is a pure sign of holding them naturally creative,
Yeah.
resourceful, and whole.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's one of the things that sometimes you just have to practice some self-management and just be like, yep, I think I might have the answer to that. And I'm just going to come back to the client. The other thing that I think about is this feeling that I have sort of energetically of always interacting with my clients as with an open hand. That whatever I say, if I do have an idea, I was doing a little brainstorming with a client today, which is a coaching technique. We designed it and I had an idea, she had an idea, but I have no attachment. I want her to be able to say, this is what I want to do. And anything that gets offered doesn't get like fit on them like a shirt and now you have to go wear it, but it's here. Do you want this? I had a thought, and that whole gives them always, always, always put them in choice.
Yeah.
There's so many other, and we'll get to a lot of them, but if I'm going to blurt something out or even challenge them, like, I think you can do more, but it's always going to be a choice because otherwise it's my agenda, not theirs. And I want them to feel like they are always in the driver's seat of this. They don't have to do anything to please me, but I might be seeing something that they're not seeing. And that's where that challenge comes in. So I think that's really
no, absolutely. Yeah. Well said.
awesome. Well, that was at least a top line look at naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. As always, if you like the video, please hit like. We love that. And share and subscribe to our channel. And please also let us know if there are topics that you'd really like us to take on. So
that'd be great. And we will see you soon. So have a good week and test out this amazing concept of holding others naturally creative, resourceful, and whole and see how it works.
thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care.